Age of Men is over. The time of the Orc has come.
Alright, hello YouTube. This is going to be the first video on this channel. Thank you guys for anyone watching this, and this channel is going to be completely about Lord of the Rings content. For any of my viewers coming over from my other channel, my Song of Ice and Fire channel, welcome. This is going to be, again, strictly Lord of the Rings. Today's video, we're going to be talking about a subject that I feel like isn't really talked about too much, especially in the Tolkien community, and I feel like on YouTube as well. And that's something I want to do on this channel, is talking about topics that maybe aren't talked about as much. And there's some interesting mysteries we have revolving today's video on the idea of why and when did Aragon go into Moria? Because I want to start this video with a very interesting quote that we get from Aragon about his experience, because he actually had been in Moria before the Fellowship. So why would he have done that, and what was kind of the circumstances, and when did that happen? But before we get into the video, if you guys like to like, subscribe, and comment for more of this type of content, please do. And yeah, so let's get into it. Now, let's start off by talking about, this is all speculation. We don't have a ton of information about this topic from Tolkien himself, so we're going to have to kind of figure out when this would make the most sense logically, when Aragon would have a chance to be in this area and have the opportunity to do it. So, I want to start off with the quote actually about what Aragon says about Moria. So, this comes from right before they are kind of deciding to go into Moria, and this comes from the Fellowship of the Ring. I too once passed the Dimrill Gate, said Aragon quietly, but though I also came out again, the memory is very evil. I do not wish to enter Moria a second time. Now, again, some people maybe have taken this quote a little too far and maybe suggesting that Aragon knew that the Balrog was in Moria. I don't think that's the case even in the slightest. I think what Aragon maybe felt or saw was Moria is this place that just gives off a long-lost kingdom that has kind of fallen to evil. And the Balrog himself, very similar to someone like Gandalf or the Ring itself, gives out that energy or power of evil. And I think Aragon also could have maybe encountered some goblins at this point as well, and that also could have been what he was referring to with evil. Also, we get other things like the nameless creatures, which I would love to do another video on in the future as well. And there's also the idea of the Watcher. Now, I want to talk about in this video, Aragon says that he went in and he came out. He doesn't say which gate that he came out at. We know that he went in the East Gate, but we don't know which way he came out. And some people have thought that maybe he came out the West Gate. He just pushed the doors open because you didn't really have to know the password or anything. You just push them open and all that. I am not going to go that far, because when you look at the actual Fellowship of the Ring, Aragon doesn't seem to really have any recollection of the western side of Moria or even the West Gate. And also, I think it makes a lot more sense that Aragon, feeling the evil, made it through the East Gate and then at some point went back. So that's the argument I would make towards that. Again, we don't have a ton of information to go on. So let's first look at when he would have possibly made it to Moria. So for you people that know about Aragon's history, I think the most logical point that he would ever maybe venture or go into Moria are 2,980 to the year 2,989. Now, why I specifically state these years is because, one, Aragon is now finished with his work in Rohan and kind of the wars in Gondor. So at this point, there's not a lot we know about Aragon at this point of what he's been doing. And two, this is right before Balin enters Moria. Now again, some people, a popular theory, and something that even myself, when this quote was actually mentioned, I had believed when I first was getting into this idea, is that Aragon actually went in hunting down Gollum or Smeagol. And this doesn't really make any sense, because when we get to the Council of Elrond, when the revelation that Balin has gone into Moria and then no word has come back, if Aragon had gone into Moria during or after Balin had gone into Moria, he would be able to say something, right? He would be able to add context to, yes, Balin, I went in through the East Gate and I saw nothing of Balin. Now, also the other thing that I would note here is that during the point after Balin goes in and like when he goes silent, we know there's actually more goblins there, so it would actually have been a lot tougher for Aragon to have gone into Moria at all. For Aragon to go in and for it to make logical sense with what happens with the news at the Council of Elrond, had to have gone in before the year 2989. So, with that being said, we now have a 9-year period in which it makes sense of when he would have gone in. So now, let's kind of figure out at what point during that span would it make logical sense for him to journey into Moria. And I think the most logical point that we could look at would be when Aragon goes to Lothlorien. So we know that there is a point where Aragon goes to Lothlorien, and we know he meets Arwen there again, because he meets her a second time. And I would assume that either before or after. Now, I would assume maybe after, because we know that he wanted to go to Rivendell as well before he went to other places like Rhûn and Umber. Or Umbar, however you say it. And at this point, maybe this makes sense that after he gets done with Lothlorien, Aragorn is looking for maybe a way to Rivendell. We know that the high passes are very treacherous and are very unsafe, and maybe Aragorn thought at this point, again, he's at his most skilled, his most confident, he's just been through wars in Gondor, and also he'd spent a lot of time with the Rohirrim. He's already the chieftain of the Dunedain, and so at this point, maybe Aragorn at this point was just curious to see, like, is this a safer path? It's probably shorter than going through the high passes, and maybe he just got curious. Because again, we also know that Arwen does have to come back to Rivendell, so maybe this was some idea where Aragorn suggests, hey, if we go through Moria, that could be a better alternative. And maybe Aragorn is just, again, just curious. Or he could have been tracking something into Moria. All of these could have been possible. Because again, like we know with Balin and the dwarves, there's not really a lot of information about what's going on in Moria. Right? At this time, there just isn't a lot there. We know that there had been some dwarven wars over Moria. And maybe there's a chance that the goblin count was down. There hadn't been any sightings of Durin's Bane in a long time to this point. So again, I think everything leads to more or less that Aragorn was kind of just curious, I would assume. And this kind of leads us to him going in. Now, again, I think the idea was he was maybe looking for a shortcut to Rivendell. I think it could be as simple as that. But something stops him. Because he presumably, I don't think made it all the way through. So what could that have been? And like I talked about at the beginning of the video, I think this could maybe point to the idea that there, was goblins infesting Moria and growing in number. Now, we know it's not a huge number because Balin was able to take over and establish a settlement. So maybe it's just the idea that Aragon felt the presence of the Balrog. Again, we know that Aragorn is someone that's very alert to his surroundings. He is someone that can sense and see things far better than any real man could because of his blood. Maybe he just knew. It's one of those, Spider-Man tingly senses, and as he drew further into Moria, his misgivings grew. And maybe that is why, when it comes to the Fellowship, he doesn't want to go into Moria. He would rather avoid Moria. So that is pretty much the entire video. Again, we don't know anything about this subject. It's brought up, and then Tolkien never really answered it. And again, I think this would just go to the idea that this, in the grand scheme of things, is not terribly important. Because Aragon, again, was never the leader. He was not the person, when Gandalf was with the Fellowship, he was never the person in charge of leading them through Moria. Gandalf knew more about it, and Gandalf, to his own credit, Gandalf has been fully through Moria, and that is confirmed, whereas Aragon has not. Because again, even when they're going through Moria, the people that are kind of taking charge and trying to figure out, the directions and where to go, is really Gimli and Gandalf. Aragon, for the most part, stays silent in this part of it. So let me know what you guys think. Why do you guys think Aragon went into Moria? And do you guys think you can have a more accurate of time of when he actually went in? I could really only narrow it down to like a 9-year window, and really just around when he went to Lothlorien, or probably before or after Lothlorien. So thank you guys all for watching my first video on the channel. Again, if you want to see more of this content, let me know. Hopefully I did a good job for you guys in the first video, and I will see you guys all in the next one. Bye, guys.